Welcome to the Gals Guide to the Galaxy podcast, where a group of gals gather for you one cool thing around our topic of the month. Is it ancient history? Is it breaking news? Is it safe for work? Well, that's up to each gal. All we know is that...
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Welcome back. I'm Barb, and I'm joined by Bonnie, Leah, and Katie talking about our one cool poetry gal. Bonnie has already talked about Phyllis Wheatley. Katie talked about Dorothy Parker, and she played a little game with us. Made us guess at the beginning, but that was fun.
Love it.
I had no idea who it was, but Leah jumped in, solved it for us.
Thank you, movies.
So I'm ready to do my poetry gal, but before I do that, Leah is going to tell us what's on the docket at Gals Guide this week.
I am. So for the week of April 17th through the 23rd, on Wednesdays, we write. So join us at the Gals Guide Library on Wednesdays at 4:30 for Writers Galaxy. It's a wonderful time for writing and connecting with other writers. Then on Thursday, April 20th, Film Club is happening. We're going to be talking about Sita Sings the Blues. It is an animated masterpiece that is based on the epic poem, the Ramayana. So join us online or in person at 5:30. Register early to get that Zoom link. There will be no Tara Circle this week because it's Fairyville week.
Yeah.
That's right. So on Friday, April 21st, it's Fairyville After Dark. That's right. This is the more adult-centered fairy fun that takes place from 6 to 9 p.m. There is glitter beer that I believe we've talked about on this podcast in detail. And so visit our Gals Guide booth. We are going to have a storyteller spin tales on each half hour. We are also going to have a fairy squishing activity where you can use our magic book and free a fairy by slamming a book to free them. Trust me, only adults can do this because kids will like it too much. Then on Saturday, Fairyville continues in a more kid-friendly manner. From 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., we're going to have fairy crafts for sale and goodies to give away. We're also going to have a scavenger hunt where you can receive a certificate of fairy awesomeness. That's right.
Fairy awesomeness.
So we are one of many organizations that are on the trail of working with Nickel Plate Arts for this very colorful event. So check us out at galsguide.org. Barb, I think you have a rando question for us.
I do have a rando question.
Yes.
So since it's Poetry Month,
Yes?
I wanted to know who your favorite poet was.
feel like I'm going to be cheating. Do I go with my first instinct?
Go.
Bob Dylan.
Nice.
I know he's a singer-songwriter, but I freaking love Bob Dylan. And Bob Dylan led me to the Beatnik Poets.
Very nice.
So, but that's the thing. I wouldn't have got to the Beatnik Poets if I didn't get from Dylan. And Dylan also had that wit and sarcasm like Dorothy Parker had. My favorite song of his is It's Okay Ma, I'm Only Bleedin'. Like, it's my favorite song.
I'm just shaking my head at you because it's such
Yeah.
a cool answer.
It's Dylan,
and mine is Shel Silverstein.
I love Shel.
No,
Great
that's
one,
all I
though.
got. Like,
No,
I just
he's
have not
good.
progressed into
Shel.
adulthood with poetry.
No. That's
But
perfect.
I remember it from my childhood,
Yes.
and Jonah always loved it.
Yes.
And we would sit in his room together
Yes.
before bed and read Shel Silverstein.
The Wishing
Crack in the
Tree.
Sidewalk.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes. Oh, so many
Favorite.
good ones. Yes, absolutely. Giraffe and a Half was one of my
However,
favorites.
Bob Dylan and Beatniks is way
Oh.
cooler than
It's not a
Silverstein.
competition. All poetry is amazing.
I feel like it is. And I lost with Shel Silverstein.
I'm just
No,
going
I-
to eat this
I love
delicious
Shel.
cookie that you made
Uh-huh.
and say that
I'm
you
going to have to go dig into Barb's wine because I drank all mine.
Oh.
I like
Drink away my Shel Silverstein sorrows.
No, it's good.
Oh my goodness.
Who is your
Well,
fave
If
poet?
we're going with singer-songwriters as well,
I mean, it's cheating, but yeah.
just off the top of my head,
Cheaters.
Weird Al comes to mind.
Oh, how
That's a good one,
fun.
though.
How
Oh,
fun.
man.
I love the puns and
Mhm.
stuff, so yeah.
It's very witty turn of phrase because there's a lot that's happening within a Weird Al-ness because it's homage to an original song, but then it's still poetry and it's still telling a story. But it's like, I don't know, it is quite magical.
It's really
actually.
fun.
Yeah.
It's really fun. and ultimately it should be fun, right? You should
Yes.
enjoy and it should make you smile in some way.
Exactly. Or make you think or make you have any kind of emotion whatsoever. Then you know it's
Connection,
working.
Yes. So mine were a little bit heavier.
Okay. Yes. No, bring us back home to it. Because...
No, so one of the ones that always stands out for me, it's Maya Angelou.
Oh, she's great.
Um,
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
probably the reason that I enjoy her work so much is after I learned about her story.
Oh, yeah.
And the challenges that she had.
Do you know why the cage bird sings? Sorry, couldn't help it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then I
Because
also
as a
like
mother owner.
Yeah.
right.
Oh,
Oh
Yeah,
my.
sorry guys. Bonnie
it-
started it.
no.
But I like that experience and her
her
life
story.
her story and how she
Yeah.
retells that, and then really liked Amanda Gorman as
Oh,
well.
Yes.
And when she spoke at the inauguration,
Yeah.
that was just very, very moving.
And Maya spoke at the inauguration
Yeah,
for
she-
Clinton
yes,
and
yeah.
just nailed it.
Yes.
And both of them echoed that same power in poetry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did like Amanda just updated fresh and her outlook on
Mhm.
and her call to action. So that was really nice. I enjoyed that. So probably two of my favorites currently.
Yes.
I always like Shell though.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. Very good.
Still have all my Shel Silverstein books.
I mean,
I
yeah,
have,
you
I have mine
gotta.
too. I have mine too.
Mm,
Just
you gotta.
loved it too. So
Perfect. Well, who do you have for us, Barb?
So I have Anne Sexton.
Sweet. Who I've only heard the name.
All right.
And because it stands out on a shelf with a last name like Sexton.
It does.
It's also in very large capital letters
it
in every book. They want to make sure on the shelf you see the word sex on it.
Yes.
Because I believe it sells, is what I've been told.
Yes, I do believe it does, and it may have made its way into some of her works, as a matter of fact.
I like that.
Katie's
Only,
right.
it's unfortunate because it's from a dark perspective. So, but we'll get into that.
I've been there.
Yeah.
Katie's still on board.
We'll do that on another podcast, Katie. Anne was born Anne Gray Harvey on November 9th, 1928 in Newton, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston.
Okay.
So this is how my mind works when I'm getting ready for a podcast. I see Newton, Massachusetts, and I'm like, how do you say that? How do you
Right.
pronounce that? Am I saying it right? It's actually how I research things. The Fig Newton is actually named after Newton, Massachusetts. It wasn't made in Newton, Massachusetts, but that was the inspiration for the name of the Fig Newton. So now you know a little
rabbit
bit.
hole.
You know, that's exactly right. You know a little
That's what this
tidbit.
podcast is for.
It has
Right.
nothing to do with poetry. It has nothing to do with Anne, but now you know.
But you'll win on
the
a
Fig
trivia
Newton.
night with that one.
Exactly. That's absolutely
And
right.
that's
you
why
will.
you listen.
That's why you will. So again, that's just outside of Boston, and she grew up kind of in that Boston area.
Mhm.
Her father was a wool merchant,
Gotcha.
and was fairly successful as a wool merchant, and she probably had a better than middle class, so probably an upper middle class upbringing. Wasn't filthy rich by any stretch of the imagination, but they were materially comfortable.
Yeah.
She was able to go to boarding school, like higher end boarding schools. She went to college, and the college was semi-finishing school, but higher end, she was able to do that kind of thing. Her dad had enough money to do that. They vacationed in a place called Squirrel Island in Maine.
I like it already.
So I will say, again, another rabbit hole another squirrel hole that I went down when I was researching. The island did not have squirrels initially.
That is disappointing.
So it may have squirrels now. They may have been
I would have
imported.
brought 'em in.
I'm
Yeah.
sure someone did.
A suitcase full.
The reason it was called Squirrel Island is because if you took an aerial picture of the island, which is relatively small,
Yeah.
it looks like a squirrel holding an acorn. So there you go. So, but again, if you can imagine a
That's
small,
a little bit of a misnomer.
I agree.
You have to look
I
at it from
agree.
above.
I don't look at nothing from above.
Exactly. They didn't even have drones back then, so it's like literally a plane
Oh,
going
yeah.
over, guy hanging out with a
Right.
I don't
Camera.
trust it.
So So there you go.
Fair.
But small island, about 100 houses, cottages that were built in the late 1800s.
Gotcha.
So kind of New England area used this as kind of a nice getaway for the summer, and her family was able to
Like
go
a
there.
Nantucket kind of getaway.
Probably
like
not
thing.
as nice as
Right,
a
well,
Nantucket
yes.
or Martha's Vineyard kind of
Right.
thing, but certainly very similar.
It's
So-
Squirrel Island.
Indiana Beach.
Indiana Beach.
Massachusetts.
This checks out.
Yeah.
Because there is no beach in Indiana Beach. Anyway,
Let's
yes.
call it quaint. Let's just
Okay.
call it quaint.
Yeah, that's fair.
And,
I mean,
and not
still, I'm
Indiana.
impressed.
Yes.
So, if you were looking at Anne and her family and her life from the outside, you'd
Mhm.
say they were materialistically, they were comfortable, they were well taken care of.
Mhm.
However, through her eventual writing, you will come to find that maybe it wasn't as nice as it was perceived to be. So there were some struggles in her upbringing, and that came out sooner rather than later. So at 40 in 1948, at the age of 19, she married Alfred Mueller Sexton.
Gotcha. Hence the name.
Hence the name. He was the second,
the
and
second.
his nickname was Ko.
All right.
Like
So
K.O.
Kayo.
All right.
Ko.
Oh.
So
Not
I
Cato.
I looked at his name, and I looked at the nickname. I'm not sure where that came from. Ko was in the military, and
Okay.
he served in Korea. And while he was in Korea, Anne became a fashion model. So she worked in Boston. She worked for Boston's Heart Agency, and very attractive. You know, had the cheekbones. You know, she went to finishing school, so she probably knew how to walk the catwalk and that kind of thing. So she did fairly well. Eventually, he came home from Korea, and they decided it was time to start a family. So they had 2 daughters in 1953, and the first one in 1953 and one in 1955. It was at this time, about age 26, that her struggles with mental health became apparent.
Gotcha.
So first it was postpartum depression, and between the birth of the 2 daughters, she had her first kind of breakdown.
Gotcha.
It led to hospitalization. It led to therapy, and she would struggle from age 26 for the rest of her life. And unfortunately, the rest of her life was only 20 more years.
Oh,
So she died at a very young age.
Was she bipolar?
She was eventually diagnosed
Right,
as
okay.
bipolar. Yes.
Gotcha.
But early on,
Ah.
they diagnosed her with
Yes.
hysteria.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Uh,
I think still
Jen-
to this
The
day,
hysterical
bipolar is, you know what I
female.
mean, not
Yes.
really that well understood.
There was a
so-
lot of things going
Yeah.
on with Anne, and it would all, like I said, if you looked at it from a distance, everything looked, she looked
Mhm.
proper and everything was
She
good.
had everything.
The more that you uncover through her work and through her writing and through her therapy and things
Yeah.
like that, it's like peeling back an onion. There's lots of layers
Wow.
that caused some trauma there.
Gotcha.
So as she began this downward spiral with her mental health, she came into contact with a gentleman by the name of Martin Orne, who was her primary therapist. Her first therapist was probably his mother,
Okay.
and she retired and Martin took over.
Gotcha.
But it was Martin who suggested that she channel her emotions into writing, and she grabbed onto that full force and
Mhm.
jumped right in. So she's in the Boston area. So first, it's a very literate area.
Yes.
Lots of universities, lots
Mhm.
of
You got Harvard.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And lots of culture and liberal takes on things. So she felt very comfortable in grabbing onto writing groups and starting up her writing kind of from scratch, because she wasn't known to be a writer before then.
And it doesn't sound like there was writers in her family either.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Correct.
Mhm.
So she did build a network for herself. So in the writing groups in Boston, she came into contact with poets like Maxine Kumin,
Gotcha.
Robert Lowell, George Starbuck, and Sylvia Plath.
Oh, Sylvia Plath.
Yes.
And I believe George Starbuck started Starbucks, right?
I do not believe
I don't
that to
think
be
he did.
true.
I
I
just-
do not
I just
believe
wanted
that.
it.
She
But
just
it's named after him, just
But
like
it's got to be. Yeah,
The
the
world
mermaid
that
on the
makes
cup
sense.
is George Starbuck.
yes, yes.
Modeled by
He had some-
Anne Sexton.
Right. Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Listen
All
to
right.
us for
Right.
true history facts.
Absolutely. Hashtag fact.
Tune in.
She started with the writing groups. She really enjoyed it, but she was very anxious about attending. So there was a poet, John Holmes. He was going to have a workshop. She couldn't even register herself for her workshop. So she wanted to go, but a friend had to register for her workshop and take her to the first workshop because she was so anxious she could not.
Having a panic attack.
She was having a panic attack just thinking about registering. So luckily she had built a network for herself who would help her.
Would drag her
in that regard.
to a writer's
Exactly.
workshop. There you go.
Who would drag someone to a writer's
Always.
workshop?
I would drag people into an anthology.
Dr. Leah
I would drag
Leach.
people into any kind of writing nest.
So we talked about she became friends with Maxine Kumin. They would critique each other's work.
Gotcha.
They would have working sessions. They would eventually go on to write several children's books together.
Oh, cute.
Sylvia Plath, also a well-known poet. They became very good friends. Sylvia also grappled with mental health issues.
I was going to say, they probably were too good of friends to encourage each other in maybe destructive ways.
That is very, very correct. That is
no.
very much correct. But they did become very good friends, and they were good friends until Sylvia ended up committing suicide at a very young age. She was only 30 when she committed suicide.
Yeah.
So, but they were good friends through that time. Anne found a mentor in W.D. Snodgrass.
Gotcha.
They met at an Antioch Writers Conference.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He was known because he wrote about multi-generational relationship challenges between mothers and daughters.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So probably relatable to some of us.
Yeah.
Anne also, as she was going through therapy and coming to terms with her childhood, she was revealing in her writing that she had some multi-generational challenges with her mother. So she wrote, using Snodgrass as inspiration, she wrote a book of poetry called The Double Image. WordPress calls this book a terrifying picture of mothers and daughters with masochistic comfort in the familiarity and inevitability of it all.
Oh, wow.
It reflects being trapped in the image of your mother and the struggle to break free.
Yeah.
So this is
I
kind
feel
of
that.
yes. So I'm
Yeah.
sure lots of people feel that, and that was kind of the start of the revelations of how bad her childhood was. So
Gotcha.
talking about being trapped in the image of your mother.
Gotcha.
Her style of poetry, kind of coming out of that. It's called confessional verse, and it's a branch of postmodernism
Okay.
that emerged in the 1950s, and it was characterized by intellectual skepticism
Okay. I like
as
it.
well as deep self-reflection. So she
Ooh.
really grabbed on to the deep self-reflection, and as she's going through therapy and as she's working with her mental health issues, she's reflecting on her childhood, and it's bringing out topics and things like that. At first, her writing was very proper and formal. But as she dealt with her mental health issue, it became more revealing and it became very raw. I used that word earlier, but that's kind of the way that it was.
Yeah.
And her work reflected her mental state, whatever she was going through at the time.
So it was authentic.
Very authentic. And then as it became personal, it became kind of political. She never really identified as a feminist, but she did identify as a woman who possibly didn't like being told what she shouldn't write about. So as she was
a feminist then.
Exactly. So she was processing her mental health issues, and she started writing. She started writing about everything that impacted her life, topics that were considered crude, obscene, and repulsive for women to write about.
Because it was something that a woman was experiencing, so therefore crude.
Yes, exactly. She started writing about menstruation.
Nice.
Right.
Abortion,
Mm-hmm.
sex fantasies, masturbation, incest, adultery, drug addiction.
Yeah.
And
It's poetry.
she wrote it in a personal way so that it revealed, if you read it, you knew what she had been processing and what impacted her life. And like many of the women that you guys speak about on an ongoing basis, she explored beyond what tradition said was acceptable for women. So lots of people didn't like it.
Sweet.
However,
that means she was doing it right.
However, she received immediate notice and acclaim. A lot of critics and a lot of a lot of people at the universities that she worked with noticed her work, published her work. She was also published in the New Yorker. You mentioned that earlier. And Harper's Magazine, which was a sister organization to Harper's Bazaar.
Yep.
But she was published right away. She won contests. She got pulled into a lot of the universities in the area to teach. So to either do poetry seminars, but she worked at Boston University, Radcliffe, and she also eventually got pulled into Harvard. So
because Radcliffe is the woman's Harvard.
Yes, yes. So
she got to both of them.
Exactly. And she actually she was very accomplished. And so her legacy was very lasting. So I'll talk a little bit about her legacy and some of the works that she did. But we still haven't dug into why and how she writes the way that she does. But her legacy, so 12 years after she wrote her first poem, she won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry.
Oh.
That was in 1967.
Goodness.
And the book was called Live or Die. It was a collection of poetry, both versed and free verse.
Gotcha.
And it centered on topics dealing with her mother, her own daughters, and her struggles with mental illness. So very revealing, dark, deep. Super personal. And 12 years after her first poem. So...
Wow.
You
That's
know,
quick.
if I ignore my poetry from when I was little, my first poem was written last year. I have 11 years.
There you go. I'm timing you.
Okay.
And go.
Go.
I believe in you.
She became a fellow in the Royal Society of Literature based out of London. She was a Radcliffe Institute Fellow as well as a Guggenheim Fellow. She was the first female member of the Harvard chapter of Phi Beta Kappa. Phi Beta Kappa is the oldest academic honor society in the world, and it recognizes those with accomplishments in the liberal arts. It is very exclusive.
Yeah.
Like very, very, very exclusive. Like we would not be in this
Not
honor society.
even, right.
But
exactly.
presidents and Nobel laureates could be in there. So she was the first female member from the Harvard chapter. So that was quite an accomplishment. She is commemorated on Boston Women's Heritage Trail. So they have a Heritage Trail, a Freedom Trail, and a Black Heritage Trail. Have you guys heard of this before?
Phyllis Wheatley is.
Yes, she is. Yes.
Oh, nice.
And it was created by Boston public school teachers.
Oh.
And the goal was to illuminate women of history and to restore women to their rightful place in the history of Boston.
Oh, very nice.
That seems to align very nicely with maybe our mission. And
Yeah,
how we're illuminating a little bit.
Yeah,
exactly.
very
I would
much
love
so.
to do that. That
That'd
would
be
be
great.
fun.
So we also go to the Salem witch trial or the Salem. Okay, so I just want to do that too.
Yep, we got to do that. If you've heard of Peter Gabriel.
Oh, of course.
So he wrote a song called Mercy Street.
Yes.
It was based on one of her works called 45 Mercy Street.
Oh.
So the piece is about she's looking for this address, 45 Mercy Street.
Okay.
And she can't find it.
Yeah.
And it talks about the struggles of looking. But both her work and his song, very sexually suggestive. They have allusions to drug use and unconsciousness. Dark, bad father figures. Bad religious figures.
Right.
So there's a lot packed into this piece, a lot revealing. It really spoke to Peter when he read it, and then he wrote a song that accompanied that. So interesting, and the lyrics are just dark and haunting.
Yeah.
And there's one line in there that talks. It's talking about a priest and her velvet box. So in contextual, it could be a velvet box, like a confessional, like she's coming to confessional, or not.
Right. Exactly.
So really dark, really deep.
Different kind of box.
Different kind of velvet box. To Bedlam and Partway Back is one of her works that deals specifically with her psychiatric struggles over time,
Gotcha.
What she learned about herself, what she learns about and how to deal with her family history. A Witch's Life dealt with aging. Transformation is a retelling of the Grimm's fairy tale.
Oh, nice.
She liked to retell stories, and if she didn't like the male lead, she would recast it as a female.
This sounds like feminism.
Could be.
Mhm.
Could be. if it was already a
Interesting.
female
Yeah.
lead, and it could be a fairy tale, it could be just another fiction piece.
Yeah.
If she didn't like the female lead or what the female lead did, she would recast
Mhm.
with her own experience and make it someone that she could get behind.
Look at that.
Yeah, so she
Nice.
did Snow White and Cinderella and Rapunzel and Sleeping Beauty, none of whom she seemed to care for very much.
Really?
So
Weird.
a sarcastic spin on Happily Ever After is how it was cast, and again retold with her life stories. So Sylvia, we talked about Sylvia Plath. She wrote a poem after Sylvia's death. So Sylvia, again, she was 30 when she committed suicide, and she said that she had been in about a 6 to 7 month depressive episode, and went home one day to her apartment where her kids were, put the kids in the other room, shut the door, taped up the door, put rags in the crevices, turned on the gas stove, and stuck her head in the gas stove.
Right. I knew about the stove. I didn't know that she was that she kind of hid the kids away and stuff.
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so Anne, again, very impacted by this because they had been friends for a while, and they commiserated with each other about their mental health issues, and they were both preoccupied with suicide.
Yeah.
So one of the lines in the poem that she wrote was, "How did you crawl down alone, into the death I wanted so badly and for so long?"
Oh.
So the poem is not only about her missing Sylvia, but it is maybe a little bit that she's jealous that Sylvia actually committed suicide and she could not.
Right. And now she's by herself.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And she has no one to commiserate with.
Yeah.
So again, all of this just shows her ongoing struggle. This is the last 20 years of her life, from the age of about 26 to 45. This was kind of all coming into play. In an interview over a year before her death, she was working on a manuscript called The Awful Rowing Toward God. She or her family, and it wasn't clear who had done this, had reached out to a priest because they were Catholic and they wanted the last rites because she was so suicidal. They thought that she was, going to take her life. And the priest, so that's, for those who don't know, so that's the last sacrament. And it's usually given on your deathbed, literally on your deathbed, or if they miss that opportunity, it comes right after. But he would not perform the last rites, and he told her that God was her typewriter.
Oh.
It did incentivize her to keep living and keep writing.
Nice.
But everything she wrote after that point was all about death and the manifestations.
That obsessive.
Very, very, very much so.
Got it, yeah.
So continuing to struggle. So we mentioned that she had been diagnosed as bipolar, but they also said, hysteria, postpartum depression. She also suffered from alcoholism. She had anorexia nervosa. Eventually, toward the end, she was diagnosed with manic depression. Gotcha. So spiraled.
All of it.
Yeah. All of it. She said toward the end of her life that people would say to her, "You seem to be better. You seem to be getting better."
Oh.
And her response was, "No, I became a poet."
Wow.
Meaning that she didn't think that she was getting better. She learned how to channel her energies and her feelings into good works. Yeah. But she never thought that she was getting better.
No.
And it doesn't sound like she was.
Yeah.
On October 4th, 1974, she had lunch with Maxine Kuhlman, who was revising that work that we talked about, The Awful Rowing Toward God. They worked on it and went home. She took off all of her rings.
Gotcha.
She downed a glass of vodka. She put on her mom's fur coat.
Oh, no.
She went out into the garage, shut all the doors, started up the car, and died of carbon monoxide inhalation.
Oh.
Very similar in the way that Sylvia had died. She was 45. It was 11 years after Sylvia's death that she committed suicide in this way.
Wow.
So both led very troubled lives, and Anne's life, even at this point, you didn't really know all the things, all those layers of the onions you didn't really know about. So a lot of that didn't come out until after her death. So after she died, Martin Orne was no longer her therapist.
Okay.
So he started speaking pretty openly about the therapy sessions. He eventually...
That's a patient, client.
After death, I
but
think
if
you
she's
can.
dead,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think
That's creepy.
it is creepy,
Yeah.
and it was not looked favorably. He
Right.
took heat for talking about it. He then released the recordings because he had recorded all
Oh
of their
my
sessions.
gosh.
So that did not go over well either. But not only did it reveal things about Anne, it revealed things about Martin as well. And
Yeah.
so a lot of mental health professionals at the time were saying that he was using unsound psychotherapeutic techniques and
Yeah.
a lot of barbiturates.
Oh no.
So he had prescribed a lot of drugs for her.
Oh.
He was using hypnosis,
right.
and a lot of the mental health professionals at the time said that things that she was revealing through hypnosis may have been suggested by Martin.
Right.
So the words that he was using, the way that he talked about things,
You're very subjective. Yeah.
Yes, she picked up on those.
Yeah.
And then she was reciting those back. So, but a lot of it was about the abuse of her father, like how he had abused her. It was also about her mom abusing her.
Okay.
Also, what came into light through the recordings was her abuse of her own daughters, sexual abuse, molestation of one of the daughters, physical abuse of both of the daughters and the husband. So you can see these patterns that started when she was very young repeated themselves.
Right.
She never recovered from that.
Right.
And so that was it was heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that at the age of 45 she still had not come to terms with it and moved on beyond that.
And that part of it is very much because of her shitty therapist.
Yes, exactly. So she had multiple shitty therapists, by the way.
Yes.
Martin Orne said that when he, and I don't know if he retired or moved on or what he did, she did have another male therapist who Anne entered into an affair with. Martin says that the affair was the last straw for Anne. She couldn't deal with it, and that's what led to her suicide. And so he seems...
That's easy for him to say.
He seemed almost protective of her.
Right.
But it's like, if you really cared about her, like
then maybe
a lot of all this other
world about
and even before that, like maybe you could have cut back on the barbiturates a little bit or something like that. So her daughter, one of her daughters was doing a biography on her, and when the tapes were released, the book was halfway done, and she essentially scrapped it all and started again because there was so much insight. She didn't argue with anything that was presented. So the abuse, her mom probably had repeated it to her, the abuse that she experienced as a child, but then also what she perpetuated on her own kids. The daughter didn't really disagree with, and that was included in some, biographical material afterwards. So it was, again, very tragic, and she was very young at 45. We lost her to suicide. So I think, I guess what I took away is I love it that she still, even in a frail state, didn't let people tell her what she should and should not do.
Exactly.
When they said you shouldn't write about these topics and it's crude and it's obscene, she was kind of like,
right.
I'm going to do it anyway.
Try living it.
Yes, exactly.
I'm just writing about it.
Exactly.
But I also had to live it. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that she wrote it to be therapy for herself, but also to possibly help others who are going through that same thing. And that multi-generational mother-daughter thing, that's a thing.
Yeah.
And so hopefully her poetry can still bring some relief to folks and they might not feel as alone.
Yeah.
The other thing I took away is that she really... she knew she wasn't getting better.
Right.
That whole line about, no, I'm not getting better. I became a poet.
Right.
So I'm writing about it. I'm still not getting better. I just feel like if you know you're not getting better, let's try something else. Maybe get rid of that therapist and move on. And if she had done that at an early age, maybe she would have had a chance. At this point, she didn't really have a chance. She never recovered from the abuses of her childhood. She had so many demons, and it was unfortunate. So I hate to end on that note, but it was a very tragic story.
Right, exactly.
But her works,
That's
and
Poetry Month.
it is poetry.
It is.
Yes.
Poetry
Month.
It is.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. We do have 2 books in the library about Anne Sexton. We do have the complete poems, and then we do have the biography by Diane Middlebrook. That's not by any chance her daughter, is it?
It is not.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
Nope.
So we do have those two, and then I think we do also have other poetry books that do have some of Anne's, like an anthology collection and that sort of stuff.
Okay,
so,
and I will
yeah.
look to verify that Diane Middlebrook is not the daughter. That name
Okay.
doesn't sound familiar,
Gotcha.
and I didn't write it down, but
Gotcha.
I will check that, and
Yeah,
we'll put
no
that
worries.
in the show notes.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yay. My goodness. Well, do you want to close it up for us,
I
Barb?
felt like I just
I
talked
know.
I just
Exactly.
went on and on. But
No, you didn't go on and on.
It
You were
was
telling
perfect.
us her amazing story.
Yeah.
Tragic as it is.
it is tragic.
That is, like as Katie said, that's poetry month.
It is.
That's
It
poetry
is.
month,
That
folks.
is part of it,
Yes.
yeah.
And I have felt that in all the episodes so far, and I'm sure I'll feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
coming
No,
up,
mine's
but
a
it's-
comic romp.
Oh, fabulous.
Stay tuned.
Fabulous. I have wine. I'll get through whatever you throw at us.
Sweet.
Well, that wraps it up for us for this week. Join us next week for another Cool Women of History as Gal's Guide podcast continues. Thanks for listening.
For show notes, links, and images from this week's show, visit galsguide.org. Want exclusive stuff like deleted bits and major bloopers? Become a Gals Guide patron today. Thanks for listening.